Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through the information overload to bring you the core insights, giving you that shortcut to being genuinely informed. Today, we're looking at a case that really shook Pakistan back in 2021. It's a story marked by, well, tragedy, intense manipulation, and just horrifying violence. It became this huge rallying cry for justice. We've got a lot of detailed source material here, and we're going to try and navigate the complex twists and turns of what became known as the Noor Mukadam case.
Yeah, and what's really striking here is how a relationship that looked, almost perfect on the surface could hide such disturbing things. And the whole situation really throws a spotlight on broader societal issues, too. We'll go through the timeline, the people involved, and the shocking aftermath.
Okay, let's start with the key players. First off, the Jaffer family. Our sources describe them as sort of new money. They built their fortune through construction contracts, often it seems, with the military. And they were known for these lavish weekend parties at their mansion.
Right? Inviting high society types. Apparently, it was partly about building connections, but also, significantly, about finding a match for their only son, Zahir Jaffer.
Interesting angle.
Well, if you look at the bigger picture, you often see this dynamic. Families with immense wealth, but maybe lacking that sort of established social standing or, long-term influence. Strategic alliances, like marriage, become pretty important.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And their son, Zahir, he was 30 back in 2021. He projected this image of, well, having a promising future.
Yeah, he was trained in psychology, even worked as a mental health speaker for Therapy Works, a reputable organization.
But at the same time, he held a pretty significant role, chief brand strategist, in his family's powerful business. It's quite a contrast.
Definitely a paradox there.
So now let's turn to Noor Mukadam. She's the woman who caught their eye at one of these parties. Noor was 27. She came from a very respected, high-status family. Her father was a former Pakistani ambassador, served in South Korea and Kazakhstan. And the sources describe her as a social activist, really involved in human rights within Pakistan. She had lived abroad, Ireland, the U.S., South Korea, before coming back home.
So it begs the question, right? Why was Noor, from this established, influential family, seen as such a good match by the Jaffers?
What do the sources suggest?
Well, it looks like her family's long-standing reputation, her father's diplomatic background, that provided the kind of social capital, the sort of cachet, that the Jaffers, despite all their money, might have been looking for.
Okay, so how did this all play out in their relationship? Zahir and Noor started dating in 2018. He actually initiated it at one of those family parties. And from the outside, apparently everyone saw them as this perfect couple.
Yeah, some sources, friends of Zahir, even said he changed for the better after meeting her, more relaxed, making jokes. Apparently head over heels in love, thought she completed his life. But that's the thing, isn't it? The public face versus the private reality. Outwardly, it looked great, even positive for him. But the sources are pretty clear that as the relationship went on, over those 3 years, a much darker, controlling side of Zahir started to come out.
Right, so by 2021, the relationship was over. 3 years. Now, there were initial rumors it was about money that Noor wasn't earning.
But the sources clarify that's not it. She was independent, self-sufficient, never relied on him financially.
So what was the real reason?
It seems undeniable it was Zahir's behavior. Increasingly abnormal, manipulative, controlling.
How so?
Well, dictating her life, telling her who she could and couldn't see, and if she defied him, explosions of anger, even physical violence.
That's terrifying.
Absolutely. It paints a really clear picture of a toxic relationship, a huge red flag that her family and friends saw. They urged her to end it.
She did.
Yeah, her breaking it off was clearly an attempt to get her life back, her autonomy.
Okay, so the relationship ends. But Zahir obviously wasn't willing to accept that.
Yeah.
Let's look at the events of July 18th, 2021. This is crucial. Zahir had a one-way ticket booked to New York, scheduled to fly out very early morning, 3:50 a.m. on July 19th. Around 9 p.m. the night before, July 18th, he contacts Noor. He claims he wants to say a final goodbye, apologize for everything, before he leaves Pakistan for good.
Right.
Now, Noor, despite everything they'd been through, she agrees to meet him, but at a small mall near his house, a public place.
Which suggests she was still cautious, choosing somewhere public.
Exactly. And she didn't tell her parents she was meeting Zahir. She said she was going out with friends. Her family was actually having a religious ceremony at home, and she likely didn't want to worry them.
It shows maybe a lingering desire for closure, or perhaps she just wanted to believe he was really leaving. Still, that choice of a public spot is telling.
But here's where things take a really dark turn. The sources detail this unfolding dissection very clearly. Noor gets to the mall. Zahir isn't there.
Oh.
He calls her, says he's still packing, asks her to come to his mansion instead. Claims he'll miss his flight otherwise.
And she hesitated.
She did. She felt it was strange changing the plan like that, but then she reasoned, the mansion wouldn't be empty. There'd be staff, chef, bodyguards, gardener. She assumed she wouldn't be totally alone if something went wrong.
That calculation, assuming safety in numbers, even in his house.
Tragically, yes. She decided to go. Now, we get this chilling timeline from a taxi driver, the one booked to take Zahir to the airport.
Okay.
Driver arrives at Zahir's house, 11 p.m. Zahir keeps delaying him. Not ready yet, excuses.
Yeah.
This goes on for hours.
Hours.
Yeah. By 1 a.m., Zahir pays the driver extra, sends him away, says he's decided not to travel after all.
Wow. So he cancels the trip right after she gets there around 10 p.m. That just screams premeditation. The whole final goodbye thing was a lie.
Exactly. It wasn't about leaving, it was about keeping her there. But then it gets even weirder. Just an hour later, 2 a.m., Zahir calls the same taxi driver again. Says he is ready to go now.
What? After sending him away?
Yep. The confused driver comes back. This time, he sees Zahir with a woman, we assume it's Noor. She looks sad. She's barefoot, no luggage.
Barefoot, no luggage. That's deeply unsettling.
And the driver noticed Zahir talking constantly during the ride to the airport. Non-stop chatter, almost like he was trying to fill the silence, prevent any questions.
A deflection tactic, maybe?
Could be. And then, as they're nearing the airport, Zahir suddenly tells the driver, turn around, go back to the mansion. Claims they've missed the flight anyway.
Back again. This whole sequence is just erratic and deeply, deeply concerning. It suggests coercion.
It really does. That taxi driver's account is just a vital piece of this awful puzzle. Okay, let's shift to the next morning, July 19th. Noor's parents wake up. They assume she came home late, maybe didn't want to disturb the ceremony, went straight to bed.
A reasonable assumption, initially.
But as the day goes on,
Yeah.
she's not there. They can't reach her phone. By evening, they're frantic. They report her missing to the police.
And her father, being a former diplomat,
Right. He immediately starts using his connections, trying everything to find her fast. You can only imagine their desperation.
it's that terrible stage where hope battles rising panic, using every resource available.
Then, evening of the 19th, something really strange happens. Her parents get a voice message from Noor's phone.
Her voice.
Yes, it's Noor's voice. Saying she's going to Lahore with friends, tells them not to worry, but she won't answer any calls. They try again and again, nothing.
That sounds completely out of character for her based on what we know.
Totally. She always kept in touch. Her parents instantly suspected she was being forced to say it, that Zahir was manipulating her, controlling the narrative again.
A forced message. Chilling.
They try calling Zahir. He doesn't answer all day on the 19th. He finally calls Noor's father back on July 20th.
And what does she say?
He pretends he knows nothing. Complete innocence. Says he hasn't been in touch with Noor, doesn't know where she is, even offers to help look for her.
While she's actually with him, that's just calculated deception. Avoiding calls, then lying. It points straight to a cover-up.
Later that same day, July 20th, the police call Noor's parents. Tell them to come to the station. They have news.
Oh no.
They'd found Noor at Zahir's house, but it wasn't. It wasn't the reunion they were praying for. The police had to ask them to identify a body.
That careful, dreadful way police have to break such news, preparing them without saying the words outright. The absolute worst moment for any parent.
And what they found, it's incredibly difficult to describe. The sources detail a horrific scene. Noor's body showed signs of just severe abuse. Her head had been severed from her body. Found about a meter away. Extensive bruising on it suggested it had been kicked afterwards.
Dear God, that's beyond words.
Her hands had countless stab wounds, defensive wounds, clearly. The blade had even gone right through them in places she fought desperately. And both her popliteal foci, the back of her knees, they were slashed, likely to stop her running. Severed tendons, major blood vessels.
Just unimaginable cruelty.
And the forensics, it got even worse. She'd been sexually assaulted multiple times before she died. The report indicated torture, prolonged torture, estimated at 48 hours.
48 hours.
Her actual cause of death was asphyxiation, strangled. The mutilation happened after that.
This level of sustained brutality, it's not just rage, it's prolonged torment. It's sadism, a complete dehumanization of the victim. Just chilling.
To even begin to understand this, we have to look at Zahir Jaffer himself. The sources reveal a really disturbing past.
What did they find?
He was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a child while in the U.S. Then as a teenager, around 14, his behavior turned violent. Nannies, even his own mother, reported being physically abused by him.
And what was the family's response?
His father's reaction, instead of, serious intervention or treatment, was to send him off to school in England.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
But the aggression continued there. He was involved in a sexual harassment incident with a female classmate.
So this pattern of violence and troubling behavior wasn't new, which makes you wonder, how on earth did he end up working as a mental health consultant? For therapy works, no less.
It's a huge question, isn't it?
A massive disconnect between that public persona and this private reality. You have to suspect his family's wealth and influence played a role in masking it, enabling him to operate in a field he was clearly dangerously unsuited for.
So, piecing together what happened inside the mansion, based on his initial confession, which he later took back, and the evidence,
What did he claim happened?
he lured Noor there, intending to reconcile, propose marriage. When she refused, he confined her, verbally abused her, physically assaulted her, sexually assaulted her, repeatedly demanding she marry him.
Just brutal coercion.
And at one point, Noor made this incredibly brave attempt to escape. She got out onto a second-floor balcony, and despite her legs being slashed, she jumped.
Jumped from the second floor, desperate.
Absolutely desperate. But tragically, two Zahir's staff members, a bodyguard and a gardener, they saw her. Instead of helping her, they caught her and dragged her back inside, back to Zahir.
Oh my God, they brought her back to him.
Yes, and this act, this betrayal, apparently enraged Zahir even more.
Right.
Because she dared to try and escape. That led to the final fatal assault.
That layer of complicity, the staff members, it's just another level of horror. It really highlights the power dynamics in that household.
And then came the attempted cover-up. After killing Noor, Zahir calls an acquaintance. Lies. Says his house was robbed, he needs help.
Not the police.
No. This acquaintance then calls Zahir's father, who's out of the country.
Okay.
And the father. Instead of immediately calling the Pakistani police, he calls 2 or 3 friends, including the CEO of Therapy Works, Zahir's employer.
What did he tell them?
He told them Zahir had fought a robber and accidentally killed him, and then asked him how to handle the body. Some sources suggest the father might have spoken directly to Zahir before making those calls.
Handle the body. That's deeply incriminating language. Even though he was later acquitted, those actions, trying to manage it outside official channels, giving those instructions, they inevitably raised huge suspicions about his involvement, or at least his priorities, protecting his son over seeking justice.
Definitely. So the Therapy Works staff arrive at the mansion. They find Zahir's friends, bodyguards gathered outside. The place is locked. Nobody dares go in.
A tense scene.
6 of the Therapy Works staff decide to go in. They climb over the fence, doors are locked, first floor is empty, they go upstairs.
Yeah.
They see a blood-soaked room, clearly a crime scene. Suddenly, Zahir appears. He has a gun, tries to fire, but it misfires. Then he attacks them with a knife, stabs one staff member severely in the neck.
Hacked them too.
Viciously. But the staff managed to overpower him, subdue him, tie him up. Only then did they call the police in an ambulance.
Wow. They basically apprehended him.
They did. And that led to Zahir's arrest and the horrifying discovery of Noor's body inside.
What a chaotic, dangerous end to it all. Shows how volatile he was even when cornered.
So, the aftermath. Justice. Zahir initially confessed to the police, showed zero remorse.
No remorse at all.
None. He even claimed he couldn't be jailed because he was a U.S. citizen. Just a shocking display of entitlement, completely misunderstanding how international law works.
Unbelievable.
Later, though, he recanted that confession. Cooked up this bizarre story that Noor wanted him to kill her as some kind of religious sacrifice.
What? That's outrageous.
He also accused her father of manipulating the police, covering up Noor's supposed drug use at his house. None of which was ever substantiated by any evidence, of course.
It's a classic pattern, isn't it? Shifting narratives, outlandish blame shifting, desperate attempts to evade responsibility by discrediting everyone else.
So the verdict came on February 24th, 2022. A Pakistani court sentenced Zahir Jaffer to death by hanging for the rape and murder of Noor Mukadam. The motive cited was her rejection of his marriage proposal.
Death penalty. And the other charges.
He got an additional 25 years for the kidnapping and rape. And those 2 staff members, the ones who brought Noor back inside,
What happened to them?
they were sentenced to 10 years in prison for their complicity. Now, interestingly, Zahir's parents were acquitted.
Acquitted. Despite those phone calls and the handle the body instruction.
Yes, and that decision really split public opinion. Many felt they should have been held accountable for the attempted cover-up. Others argued maybe they were innocent of direct involvement, perhaps acting out of desperation while abroad, or even victims themselves of Zahir's manipulation.
It certainly raises tough questions about how justice functions, especially when wealth and influence are in the mix. Proving that level of complicity versus, say, panicked parental reaction from afar, it's legally complex, and it definitely fueled public debate about fairness.
Absolutely. In this case, even with the verdict, it continues to echo really strongly in Pakistan. It sparked this massive hashtag Justice for Noor movement.
It was huge online.
Huge. Trended globally. Led to public protests, candlelight vigils. People raised significant funds for Noor's family, over 1.6 million Pakistani rupees. It became a rallying cry for justice for women, highlighting the dangers of toxic relationships, gender-based violence.
It's quite profound, really. Noor was a human rights activist in her life, and in death, she became this incredibly powerful symbol for those same rights, mobilizing a huge social movement. A tragic irony.
But the case also revealed some really conflicting views in society. Disturbingly, some people blamed Noor's family. Some even blamed Noor herself for going to his house, completely ignoring the context of manipulation.
Victim blaming, unfortunately, still happens.
Yeah. And there were even calls to reduce Zahir's sentence. Some argued the death penalty was too harsh, pointing out it's relatively rare for non-terrorist crimes in Pakistan. There was this undercurrent of concern that his social status might ultimately protect him from execution.
Right.
People even vandalized Justice for Noor signs in protest against the death sentence for him.
It just shows how deeply ingrained biases and power structures can warp public discourse, even when facing such a horrific crime. You see this complex mix of calls for justice, privilege, victim blaming, and debates about punishment all colliding.
The Noor Mukadam case really is a stark, deeply unsettling reminder of the dangers that can hide beneath seemingly perfect surfaces, but also the power of a society demanding justice. It forces conversations about mental health, about toxic relationships, about the societal pressures that can either enable or fight against these kinds of terrible acts.
Yeah, and it brutally exposes how vulnerable someone can be, even with privilege, when faced with unchecked psychopathy and entrenched power dynamics. It makes you question how wealth can shield perpetrators, and how public outrage, while powerful, sometimes only achieves partial justice against a slow-moving system.
It's a complex story, disturbing but vital to understand for the lessons it holds. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Noor Mukadam case. Until next time, take care.